Hey guy, tonight we're going to crash an exclusive dinner party, a royal Egyptian feast, lit by oil lamps and moonlight, where every dish on the table is older than your country and 10 times weirder. Imagine showing up to a banquet where the appetizers are goose soaked in honey and the bread is sacred enough to have its own temple. You probably wouldn't survive this dinner party, unless you're cool with eating things that have been blessed, embalmed, or possibly walked the earth 2 days ago as a god. So before you settle in and get cozy, remember to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake at the end, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time zone you're in. Now turn off the lights, maybe get a soft fan going behind you, and let's gently slip into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot, your feet brushing the cool, polished limestone floor of a palace courtyard. Around you, columns carved with hieroglyphs rise toward a sky swirling with starlight. There's incense in the air, frankincense, maybe, and the distant trickle of a fountain shaped like a lion spitting water from its mouth. Before you, a low table glows with golden plates stacked high with food not meant for mortal mouths. You've stepped into the court of Pharaoh Akhenaten, a ruler who worshipped the sun god Aten and who, rumor has it, made his cooks cry more often than his soldiers. You're not here as a guest. You're more like a dreamer drifting through a forgotten memory. And the first thing you smell? Roast goose. Not just any goose. This one was raised by priests, fed honey and herbs its whole life, and, get this, given a name and possibly a short funeral before it was cooked. It glistens, sliced open at the breast, steaming with a sticky glaze of fermented date syrup and wildflower honey. A temple baker slices off a thin sliver and lays it on a triangular wedge of bread that looks suspiciously holy. This bread isn't your average sandwich base. It's made from emmer wheat, an ancient grain so difficult to process that historians are still confused how they did it without modern tools. The dough was kneaded in temples, often by priestesses, and offered in rituals before it ever touched a pharaoh's lips. Some scholars argue it had to be pre-blessed, kind of like ancient spiritual gluten. You bite in. It's sweet and gamey, with a texture halfway between duck and crispy pork belly. And strangely, there's a floral aftertaste, maybe lavender or lotus. That's when you realize, nothing here is cooked without symbolism. A slave-turned-steward offers you a goblet filled with something thick and reddish, pomegranate wine. Maybe. But no, it's a mixture of fermented dates, herbs, and wild yeast brewed in clay vessels that were probably older than your entire family tree. Date wine was popular among the elites, and while regular Egyptians drank a beer like gruel, the pharaoh had the good stuff, filtered, stored in amphorae, and spiced to taste like victory. Maybe, in fact, eating at this level was never just about food. It was power, religion, performance. This was political theater with a wine buzz. A musician plucks at a harp in the corner. Dancers move in slow, hypnotic circles, their beaded wigs shimmering in the torchlight. But the real drama is on your plate. Next comes a small clay bowl of lentils with something floating on top, a reddish glaze of tamarind and pomegranate. Simple. Maybe. But grown only in palace gardens, irrigated with water hand-drawn from sacred wells, historians still argue whether these lentils were reserved solely for the pharaoh or simply symbolic, a kind of low-key humility flex. Look, I could eat this peasant food, but only when I choose to. Like an emperor choosing to dine on instant noodles for fun. You glance around. Behind the columns, servants hover, waiting for the pharaoh to blink before sprinting into motion. Food is brought out in waves. There's an entire roasted fish, silver-scaled, crusted with salt and spices. Possibly a Nile perch, though one papyrus hints it could be tilapia, revered as a symbol of rebirth. Ancient Egyptians were big on symbolism. Eat a fish. Invoke eternal life. Eat a duck. You're consuming divine silence. Probably. No one's quite sure anymore. Then a small moment of weirdness. The steward presents a sealed jar, breaks the wax, and scoops out a gelatinous cube of something yellowish. Royal fat, you hear whispered behind you. Clarified goose fat. Infused with herbs, set into gelatin and chilled. Served cold, like revenge, this was considered a delicacy. Spread on barley cakes. Thought to promote fertility. Or chest hair. Or enlightenment. No one really knows anymore, but it's here, and it's oddly buttery, and then, dessert. A tiny dish of lotus seed paste, molded into the shape of the eye of Horus. It's nutty, soft, slightly sweet. And deeply confusing. Was it made for taste, or to ward off evil spirits from inside your stomach? Historians still debate whether this dish was actually consumed, or simply placed near the pharaoh as a kind of edible spell. You sit back, belly full, slightly woozy. The combination of meats, sweets, and fermented everything has hit you like a linen-wrapped freight train. The moonlight spills over the banquet table, painting everything in silver. You're surrounded by symbols, rituals, dishes you can't pronounce. And every bite feels like stepping a little closer to something, divinity, maybe, or indigestion. You're only on the first course of a 20-part dream. But already, you realize, this isn't just food, it's the afterlife, served on a plate. The date wine is still warm in your belly when a new tray appears, carried by 4 attendants like it's holding treasure. You lean forward, expecting more honeyed goose or fragrant bread. Instead, they lift a lid carved from alabaster to reveal, crocodile, not a whole one, thankfully. Just strips, small, thin cuts, dried and dusted with crushed herbs. You blink. It smells, oddly smoky. Almost like jerky left too close to a campfire. Welcome to the royal appetizer course, where creatures once worshipped in temples now show up sliced and seasoned. And this? This is the pharaoh's idea of a protein boost. Crocodile meat, according to some texts, was believed to bring the eater strength, wisdom, and a certain fearlessness, not surprising considering who had to catch the crocodile in the first place. Ancient Egyptians both revered and feared these beasts. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of strength and fertility, had entire temples filled with mummified crocs. That's right, stuffed, scented, and buried like nobles. So how did their meat end up on the royal menu? That's where the arguments begin. Some historians say this dish was reserved only for religious festivals, offered first to Sobek himself. Others believe it was eaten by pharaohs to absorb divine strength, or maybe just to impress visiting diplomats with their total lack of fear. You lift a slice and bite. It's chewy, salty, earthy. Like jerky crossed with calamari. You're not entirely sure whether you're getting stronger, or just mildly regretting your life choices. You wash it down with another sip of date wine. It's thick, almost syrupy now. Fermentation wasn't an exact science back then, so every goblet was a little unpredictable, half refreshment, half roulette wheel. The air around you grows more humid, heavy with spice and incense. A breeze flows in from the Nile, carrying the faint scent of papyrus and wet stone. You hear laughter, a low, rumbling chuckle from the high priest of Sobek, seated beside the pharaoh. He's dipping a crock strip in what looks like a garlic and olive oil paste, humming a hymn under his breath. Across the table, a dancer finishes her routine, and the next course arrives. It's squishy. Wrapped in palm leaf. You gently unfold the layers and find something resembling tamarind paste rolled around a soft piece of eel. Yep. Crocodile jerky was just the warm-up. Eel was another delicacy, slippery, rich, and usually caught near the Nile Delta. Some texts even suggest eels were bred in temple ponds and fed grain soaked in beer to plump them up. Once again, they weren't just food, they were sacred symbols. Associated with regeneration and the underworld, they slithered between the worlds of the living and the dead, which is a fun thought while you're chewing one. It's soft, oily, and absolutely dripping in flavor. The palm leaf wrap gives it a smoky earthiness. The paste tastes like garlic, coriander, and possibly regret. You're not sure if you're impressed, or haunted, and of course, no weird dish goes unargued. Some historians insist these eels were off-limits to all but the priests. Others think they were a staple at coronation feasts. One recent theory even suggests eels were used in love potions, and you're now slightly concerned about what this dinner is trying to tell you. you glance at the pharaoh. He nods once, as if to say, yes, you may continue confusing your digestive system. Another tray comes, and it's refreshingly familiar, flatbread and cheese. You breathe a sigh of relief until you realize, it's not just cheese, it's crocodile cheese. Okay, not literally made from crocodiles. But the milk used? Possibly taken from animals raised in the sacred pens of Sobek's temple. Highly ritualized, carefully churned, and aged underground in clay jars. The texture is crumbly, the smell, intense. Somewhere between strong goat cheese and I shouldn't have opened this jar indoors. You take a bite. It's sharp, tangy, and full of secrets. No joke, some pharaohs believed cheese like this could unlock divine visions. Or just clean you out thoroughly. Either way, it's not your average snack. A servant approaches with a basin for hand washing, fragrant water with lotus petals floating on top. You dip your fingers in, trying not to imagine how many times this exact ritual was repeated through the centuries. The rhythm of life in ancient Egypt wasn't just ruled by the Nile's flooding, it was ruled by meals like this. Rituals. Symbolism. Bite after blessed bite, you recline slightly on the cushioned stone seat. Around you, the feast continues. Dancers sway, musicians pluck, high priests argue quietly about the meanings behind which dish was served first. Every choice at this table matters, from the meat on the plate to the direction of the napkins. And always, at the center, the pharaoh sits motionless, face unreadable. Was he enjoying the crocodile strips? Or silently judging you for chewing too loudly? The moon has shifted higher in the sky. The oil lamps flicker. You're halfway between full and floating. And the night is far from over, your stomach churns gently, unsure whether to celebrate or revolt. But your curiosity is still wide awake. Because if crocodile jerky is just the second course, what in the world could possibly come next? Probably something wrapped in gold and suspiciously twitchy. You've only just begun to digest the crocodile meat when the next course arrives, grand, glistening, and still sizzling from the fire. A roasted ibex, whole, curved horn still intact, its body draped in a layer of honey and sesame seeds that sparkle in the torchlight like embers. You didn't even know ibexes were edible, let alone served like this, garnished with blue lotus petals and what might be dried dates or possibly charred beetles. You don't ask, two servants stand poised with long bronze knives. With a slight nod from the pharaoh, they begin slicing the meat with ritualistic precision. The first cuts are reserved, not for him, not for the high priest, but for the statue of a god at the head of the banquet. You can't tell which deity it is, but the horns are familiar. You're told this ibex came from the eastern desert, hunted during a ritual expedition meant to demonstrate Pharaoh's dominance over chaos. Every bite of it is a performance, an act of theater that says, I control the wild things. Political theater at its tastiest. When the meat reaches you, it's rich and dark, almost like lamb but with a wilder flavor, herbaceous, with a whisper of smoke and a backhanded kick of spice. The honey glaze gives it a crisp edge that crackles between your teeth. This isn't everyday food. This is power on a plate. Historians still debate whether ibex was ever commonly hunted for food or only brought out for these very grand, very symbolic state dinners. Some argue pharaohs used these animals as messages to their rivals, look what I can get and eat, and you can't. Others think ibex meat was so tough it needed a full day of marination in beer and crushed lotus to even be chewable. Either way, this is not something you'd find in the peasant quarter. A priest murmurs a blessing in ancient Egyptian as the meat is served. You don't understand the words, but you feel the gravity of it. Something about this feels sacred. Even your chewing slows down. Then, for balance, because even pharaohs need their greens, you're handed a lotus salad. Blue lotus petals, cucumber-like melon slices, and a scattering of fresh herbs like dill, mint, and perhaps, coriander. The smell is floral and oddly intoxicating. You chew thoughtfully. It's refreshing, but there's a subtle bitter note beneath the sweet. Almost medicinal. Almost mind-altering. Here's where it gets interesting: the blue lotus wasn't just a pretty flower. Ancient Egyptians believed it had psychoactive properties, mild, but meaningful. Some claim it produced a floating sensation, a gentle euphoria. A few scholars even suggest pharaohs used it before making major political decisions or engaging in religious visions. Which explains the dreamy look on some of the guests' faces. There's academic squabbling, of course. One camp says the lotus was ceremonial only, never eaten. Another insists that's just modern prudishness, and the ancients knew exactly what they were doing when they tossed handfuls into a bowl with a splash of palm vinegar and honey. You're feeling fine. Really fine. Maybe even a little floaty. It could be the wine. Or the lotus. Or the fact that you've now eaten crocodile, eel, and a possibly hallucinogenic flower salad in under 2 hours. The dancers shift into a slower rhythm now. The musicians lower their notes. The air thickens with incense, jasmine and sandalwood. Carried in from large burners tended by silent boys with shaved heads. A breeze rustles the fabric canopy above. You close your eyes for a moment. When you open them, the scene hasn't changed, but your perception has. You're starting to realize that for the pharaoh, every meal was a cosmic act. A rehearsal for the afterlife. A negotiation with the gods. A flex of power and wealth, of course, but also a statement about harmony. Ma'at. The balance of things. And also, never trust a salad. Another cup is pressed into your hands, smaller and more ornate. The servant whispers, lotus nectar. It's chilled. Sweet, syrupy. You drink it, because at this point, what's one more potentially sacred substance? The pharaoh raises a hand. The banquet pauses. Servants freeze. Musicians stop mid-note, and then, he smiles. It's slight. Barely there. But it's enough. The feast resumes. Everyone exhales. You didn't realize until just now that you've been holding your breath since the ibex was carved. A high priest raises a toast, not in words, but in gesture. A slow circle in the air, a finger pointed to the stars, then a pat of his chest. You mimic the motion. Why not? You're halfway to pharaoh status by digestion alone. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the sound of river water slapping against a boat. Maybe it's the lotus nectar talking, but you start to imagine what it would be like to float down the Nile after a meal like this, wrapped in linen, dreaming of ibex and lotus, but there's no drifting yet. Dessert hasn't even started, and you have 17 more courses to go. You're gently reclined now, your back resting against woven cushions, the stone cool beneath your feet. The rhythm of the feast has changed, it's slowed, softened, like the Nile at dusk. A breeze stirs the golden fabric canopy above, and with it comes the scent of something fishy. But not in a bad way. More like nostalgic. Smoky. Familiar, but hard to place. A servant approaches, carrying what looks like a reed-wrapped bundle. With a soft motion, they peel it open, and inside is something dark, dry, and striped with salt crystals. Fish jerky, yes. Jerky, but this isn't some modern gas station snack. This stuff was made on the banks of the Nile, dried in the fierce Egyptian sun and rubbed down with spices and resins that were probably also used to embalm cats. You sniff it. It's intensely aromatic, like coriander, tamarind, dried dill, and smoke from a temple brazier. You take a bite. It's chewy. Salty. Tangy. There's a strange sweetness near the end, like someone dipped it in date syrup and then forgot to mention that part. This was not food for the common folk. Sun-dried fish was a ritual item, reserved for religious ceremonies, offerings to the gods, or feasts for the pharaoh and his elite court. And as always, the details are murky. Some scholars say these fish, likely catfish or tilapia, were caught during sacred harvests, smoked with acacia bark, and stored in sealed jars. Others argue they were a royal trade good, imported from upstream. Packed in honey or oil. And, naturally, no one can agree on which species was most sacred. Tilapia. A symbol of rebirth. Catfish. Feared for its size and whiskers. Eel. Already eaten in the last course, you lean into the flavor as musicians softly strike their strings in the background. Somewhere behind the throne, a water bearer pours a stream of cool water into a stone basin, perhaps for washing hands. Or perhaps just for ambience. Then comes a second dish, and it's even stranger. Thin slices of something black and shiny, served in a shallow bronze bowl. You hesitate. It smells sharp, earthy, almost sweet. You glance at a nearby priest, who is already scooping a piece onto flatbread and eating with enthusiasm. The servant sees your hesitation. Black garlic, he says, in a whisper that's both reverent and slightly smug. Fermented in desert ovens for weeks. A delicacy. You poke at it. It's soft, like roasted plum, but has a deep, balsamic tang. You try it. It melts on your tongue, leaving behind the taste of molasses, umami, and maybe old books. It's oddly delicious. You have no idea why. Black garlic wasn't just an invention of hipster chefs, it may have existed thousands of years ago. Created by accident in the heat of the Egyptian sun. Some believe it was medicine. Others say it was an offering. And a few suggest it was meant only for temple feasts, never for ordinary consumption, and here's where the eel returns. Because nestled beside the garlic slices are ribbons of eel meat, now poached and soft, served cold in a garlicky oil. This dish, you're told, was often eaten during new moon rituals, when the line between the living and the dead was thinnest, and priests whispered prayers into jars sealed with wax and blessed by lunar light. Historians are still debating whether this dish was spiritual sustenance or just a particularly strong midnight snack. You try it anyway. The texture is delicate, buttery, with a deep, mysterious flavor. You'd call it elegantly slimy, if that were a compliment. The garlic cuts the richness, and suddenly, you get it. You understand why pharaohs ate like this, not just to be full, but to feel changed by every bite. The room dims slightly. More oil is added to the lamps, casting long shadows across the stone floor. You sip some cool water laced with hibiscus. Then another clay bowl is passed your way. Inside, a dessert. You're not sure. It's white and slightly foamy, like milk whipped with something floral. You take a spoonful, and are instantly comforted. It's milk from the sacred white cows of Hathor, the goddess of motherhood, music, and joy. Creamy, light, chilled in underground jars, and infused with lotus oil. This isn't just dairy, it's divine dairy. The pharaohs believed milk from these cows had healing properties. Only a few of these animals existed at any given time, and they were guarded like royal children. Their milk was used for anointing newborns, mixing into sacred perfumes, and apparently, making desserts good enough for royalty and gods alike. Some suggest this milk was so treasured that it was often dried into curd and buried with rulers to accompany them into the afterlife. Others scoff, claiming it was little more than a fancy bedtime drink, but there's no denying this one thing: it is delicious. And possibly magical. You feel it coat your insides in a blanket of calm. The edge of your thoughts begins to soften. The music shifts to a low hum, harps and flutes echoing like lullabies across the court. You're now somewhere between courses, between centuries, between real and dream. And it's only part 4, but already, you're beginning to understand something vital. For the Egyptian pharaohs, strange food wasn't strange at all. It was sacred, strategic, sensory. A full-body experience designed to reshape your spirit, one dish at a time, and also, possibly to confuse foreign dignitaries into submission. You think you've seen it all: roasted ibex, lotus-laced eel, fermented garlic. But the next dish is so ordinary at first glance that it almost feels like a joke. A small clay bowl, unglazed, warm from the kitchen. Inside, seeds. Glossy, crimson, jewel-like pomegranate seeds. You blink. This? After crocodile and sacred cow milk, but as you lift the bowl and the seeds catch the light like rubies under oil lamps, you remember, nothing is ever just food here. In ancient Egypt, the pomegranate wasn't a fruit. It was a portal. A spell. A symbol of everything from fertility to eternity. The seeds crunch between your teeth, sharp and tart with just a whisper of sweetness. They pop like tiny drums in your mouth, tick. Tick, and for a moment, you feel like you're biting into something older than civilization itself. Historians have long debated the exact role of pomegranates in Egyptian royal life. Some argue they were prized for their resemblance to blood droplets, making them a fitting offering to gods of life and death. Others claim they were medicinal, used for digestion, or even to freshen breath. A few fringe scholars believe pomegranates were so sacred they were forbidden to anyone below priest rank, though there's suspiciously little evidence to back that up, and still others. They say pomegranates were embalmed alongside pharaohs, tucked gently into linen wraps as symbols of rebirth in the next world. Like ancient Egyptian snack packs for the soul, you glance around the table. Everyone seems to be eating more slowly now. More contemplatively. Even the pharaoh chews with his eyes half closed, as if each seed is a memory from a previous life. A servant brings a second bowl, this one filled with a thick, brownish paste. You take a cautious sniff. Sweet, earthy, with a note of, is that tamarind? Or perhaps fig? You taste it, ah. Fig paste, rich and sticky, sweetened with honey and thickened with ground barley. It clings to your tongue like molasses and leaves behind a warmth that settles in your chest. There's a complexity to it, tiny bits of something crunchy, maybe crushed date seeds or cracked grain. It's ancient jam with attitude, but here's the thing, some people believe this wasn't just fig paste. There's a small but vocal group of scholars who claim that ancient Egyptian royalty dined on fruits that shouldn't have been there at all, exotic imports from distant lands. Mangoes. Apricots. Even, in one extremely questionable source, pineapple. Now, let's be clear, most Egyptologists roll their eyes at this. Mango? In Egypt? In the New Kingdom? Highly unlikely, they say, adjusting their glasses. Mangoes didn't make their way out of South Asia until much later. Pineapple? Absolutely not. But figs? Figs were everywhere. Beloved. Cultivated. Deified, even, so what are you eating? Maybe just fig paste. Maybe something rarer, smuggled up the Red Sea in clay jars marked with seals no one dared question. Maybe even a proto-mango, now extinct. We'll never know. The paste is served with strips of salted barley cracker and a drizzle of black honey. It's addictive. You keep dipping, chewing, licking your fingers. You tell yourself it's for historical accuracy. The room begins to sway gently, only slightly. The combination of rich fruit, lotus wine, and a night of ceremonial indulgence is catching up to you. You lean back. A scribe at the edge of the feast is recording something, notes, maybe. Recipes? Or perhaps he's just writing, that one guest ate like 10 portions of fig paste. Another dish arrives, this one making no attempt to be subtle, a full fish, scaled, steamed, and stuffed with seeds, nuts, and herbs. More pomegranate. More coriander. A little cinnamon, if your taste buds are to be trusted. The fish is tender, flaking off with the touch of a bronze spoon. It's not salted but wrapped in preserved grape leaves, moist, earthy, and strangely refreshing after the heavy sweetness of the figure. You're told this fish, still hot from its clay oven, was caught from a royal canal, reserved only for the palace. These canals weren't just practical irrigation tools, they were divine pathways, linking the pharaoh's home to the god's domain. The fish that swam there were considered special. Sacred. And apparently, quite delicious. A priest explains in hushed tones that the stuffing in the fish is symbolic. Seeds for rebirth. Nuts for strength. Herbs for protection. Everything in this meal has been chosen not just for flavor, but for its spiritual resonance. It's not just dinner, it's preparation. For something else, the musicians begin playing a softer melody, flutes, low drums, a stringed instrument plucked with more reverence than rhythm. You're full, but not overwhelmed. Relaxed, but alert. The feast has shifted you into a new state, a different kind of wakefulness. Or perhaps, a sleepiness that feels sacred. As you dab your lips with a linen cloth scented with rosewater, a thought occurs to you: you're not just eating like a pharaoh. You're becoming one, and by the end of this night, who knows what other forbidden fruits you'll taste. The fig paste still lingers on your tongue, but the moment is fleeting, because something new, something ancient and deeply peculiar, is being lowered onto the table with an almost ritual hush. It's a basket. Not gilded. Not jewel-studded. Just humble woven reeds. But everyone leans forward, the lid is removed, inside, massive eggs. Pale, slightly speckled, and the size of your fist, crocodile eggs. You don't ask how they got them. You don't want to know. But based on everything you've eaten so far, it probably involved a priest, a moonlit ceremony, and at least one person who ran faster than a very angry mother crocodile. The eggs are cracked open. Their contents, yellow and thick, are whisked with herbs and poured into a bronze pan. A fire is lit. And before your eyes, you witness one of the rarest breakfasts in history, the crocodile egg omelette. You're served a wedge. It's fluffy but dense, like a frittata crossed with a ritual offering. The flavor? Earthy, rich, and oddly nutty. Spiced with fenugreek, coriander, and something citrusy, maybe sumac or wild lemon peel. You chew slowly. Carefully. And with just a bit of awe, because here's the thing, crocodile eggs weren't just rare. They were powerful. In ancient Egypt, crocodiles were associated with Sobek, the god of strength, protection, and fertility. His temples kept sacred crocodiles, often adorned with gold nose rings and even tiny linen capes. The eggs of these animals were considered potent symbols of rebirth and cosmic order. Eating them was not for commoners. It was a spiritual dare. Some accounts suggest that these omelets were served to pharaohs before major decisions, wars, marriages, ceremonial sacrifices. Others argue they were consumed during specific festivals, particularly ones that invoked chaos and attempted to tame it with offerings. And of course, there are skeptics who believe it never happened at all. That these eggs were too revered to be touched, let alone scrambled. But the evidence, eggshell fragments found in temple ruins, mentions in obscure papyri, murals showing baskets of large oval shapes, tells another story. You're not sure whether this dish is giving you power. Or gas. But either way, you're honored, and possibly slightly terrified. The next course arrives quietly, almost as an afterthought: bread, just bread. But as with everything else tonight, this is not what it seems. The loaves are small, triangular, with edges so perfect they look sculpted. The flour is emmer wheat, the most ancient kind, and it's been milled by hand, sifted 3 times, and mixed with spring water from the temple fountains. The loaves are soft in the middle, crispy at the edges, and here's the twist: they glitter. You look closer, they're dusted in gold, actual, edible gold. Crushed into powder and brushed over the crust before baking. The effect is subtle, not blinding or flashy. Just a quiet shimmer, like the sunlight on the Nile in early morning. You bite in, the texture is perfect. Slightly nutty, earthy, with a touch of sweetness. And of course, absolutely no nutritional value from the gold, but a whole lot of royal energy. This wasn't everyday bread. This was celebratory. Ceremonial. Baked for offerings to gods, to mark royal births, victories in battle, the completion of a tomb, or the beginning of a season. Historians still debate whether pharaohs ate gold-dusted bread regularly or if it was a once-a-year extravagance. Some say it was used as an edible tax, grain gifted to the gods, then returned, transformed, for royal consumption. Others say it was pure indulgence. You say, who cares, it's delicious. And you feel majestic. As you finish the final bite, you're handed a drink. Not wine. Not water. A milky, beige liquid in a delicate cup carved from alabaster. You sip, and discover that it's beer. Kind of. This isn't the frothy stuff you're used to. It's thick, grainy, almost like drinkable bread. Brewed from barley and emmer wheat, twice fermented, and sweetened with dates or honey. It's sour and bready and oddly energizing. This was the beer of the ancients. Workers on the pyramids drank gallons of this every day. It was sustenance, hydration, and reward all in one. But this particular blend? This was Pharaoh-level beer. Filtered, flavored, blessed, and possibly just strong enough to make you think the crocodile omelet is repeating on you. You sit back, full again. But the beer settles you. Grounds you. Reminds you that even kings dined on grain and honey and humble drinks, just very, very fancy versions of them. You glance at the pharaoh. He seems pleased. His eyes are half-lidded. His hands rest gently on his lap. The court is quieter now. Even the priests are smiling, and you've just eaten an egg laid by a crocodile god, bread sprinkled with gold, and beer so thick it could count as a side dish, and somehow, you're still hungry. Hungry for whatever mystery is waiting in the next clay bowl. The next dish doesn't shimmer. It doesn't hiss or steam or sparkle under torchlight. It just smells, strongly, a kind of sharp, almost cheesy tang drifts through the air like a warning. You've survived crocodile eggs, fish jerky, and fermented lotus. How bad could this possibly be? Then the priest nearest you lifts a lid and reveals what looks like cheese. Pale. Crumbly. Veined with faint streaks of blue and gray. It's sweating under the heat, pooling slightly in its alabaster bowl. You take a step back, then a hesitant step forward. The scent is intense. Like aged goat milk mixed with ancient mystery, and a little vengeance, you're about to try one of the rarest and strangest foods ever found in the tombs of Egyptian royalty, Pharaoh's cheese. That's not just a nickname, by the way. In 2018, archaeologists unearthed a 3,200-year-old jar of what they identified as actual cheese from the tomb of Thales, a high-ranking Egyptian official. Analysis showed it was likely made from a mix of cow and either goat or sheep milk, preserved with added bacteria, some of which may or may not have been deadly. You stare at your portion. Modern science hasn't touched this one, but it's certainly alive. You spread a bit on flatbread and take a bite, and suddenly your taste buds throw up their hands in confusion. It's rich. Sharp. Crumbly, but creamy. Like feta met gorgonzola in a hot desert alley and they decided to fight your digestive tract together. There's a smoky aftertaste that makes your nose tingle. And just when you think you're done, bam! A strange sweetness blooms at the back of your tongue. Is that honey? Or something more sinister? Historians can't agree on whether pharaohs loved this cheese or merely tolerated it. Some claim it was used medicinally, fermented to boost gut health or treat infections. Others think it was a status symbol. A few fringe voices believe it caused hallucinations. Or death. But let's not think about that now. Because now comes the second part of the course. Something sweet to cut the stink. The plate arrives. Delicate, ivory-colored bowls filled with fig paste. No. Thicker. Darker. A rich blend of dried apricots and dates ground into a glossy spread and mixed with tiny threads of cinnamon and what may be powdered rose petals. You taste it and it's instantly addictive, like sunshine and tree sap and sugar had a party and forgot to tell your pancreas. The pharaoh, for all his control and mystery, was a known sweet tooth. Especially one, Queen Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs, famously organized expeditions to the land of Punt, modern-day Somalia or Eritrea, just to bring back incense. Myrrh, exotic trees, and figs. Figs were everything to the Egyptians, symbol of life, pleasure, and prosperity. They were mashed into cakes, stuffed into geese, and buried with royalty in tightly sealed jars. You're pretty sure you've now eaten enough figs to be honorary royalty, or at least the court jester. Suddenly, there's movement at the edge of the table. A servant clears away the cheese, but before your stomach can breathe in relief, another platter is set down. It's shimmering, translucent. Circular. You lean in, and realize it's dessert, but not just any dessert, a beetle tart, yes. That kind of beetle, specifically, finely ground scarab beetles, mixed with honey and crushed nuts. baked into a sticky little pastry that glows under the lamps like a trap. You stare at it, and it stares back. Now, before you panic, let's put this in context. The scarab beetle, symbol of rebirth and the sun's daily journey, was one of the holiest symbols in ancient Egypt. Scarabs rolled balls of dung across the desert, which the Egyptians saw as a mirror of the sun rolling across the sky. So, kind of divine. There's some debate among scholars whether actual beetles were consumed. Some believe they were purely symbolic. Others argue that ground beetle protein may have been added to honey cakes as a way to internalize the power of rebirth. Tonight, you're going with it. You bite into the tart, and surprise, it's not awful. The beetles are ground so finely they're barely more than a crunch. The honey dominates, warm and herbal. There's something nutty, perhaps almond or date seed. And underneath it all, a faint minerality that makes you think of sandstone and sun-baked clay. You chew slowly. Respectfully. Reverently, because in that moment, you're not just eating dessert, you're consuming belief. Symbolism. A tiny, sugary contract with eternity. You sit back, the music, ever present, has slowed to a hum. Soft flutes and a whisper of strings fill the background. Lamps are dim just slightly, casting the room in gold and shadow. You feel different. Changed. Not just full, but spiritually saturated. You've tasted cheese that smells like the afterlife, dessert made from beetles, and a tart sweet enough to make a goddess cry. Your body hums with old sugars, strong beer, and the faint knowledge that you just swallowed something once worshipped in granite. You glance toward the pharaoh. He is still silent, but there is the faintest hint of a smirk. He knows exactly what he's fed you. And the night isn't done. You're starting to lose track of time. Or maybe time is losing track of you. Either way, as the beetle tart dissolves into memory, the next course arrives, and this one, oddly enough, is presented with the utmost seriousness. The servant stands straighter. The air stills. Even the music pauses as a procession of 4 acolytes enters the courtyard, carrying a black lacquered box. Everyone watches. They set it down gently in front of the pharaoh. He nods. The lid is lifted. Inside, a bowl carved from obsidian, chilled with chunks of river ice harvested that very morning, wrapped in linen, and stored deep beneath the palace. And in that bowl, a single scoop of frankincense sorbet. Wait. What? You blink. Yes. You heard right, frankincense. The stuff burned in temples. The smoke offered to gods. The scent that clings to priests and floats in catacombs. Tonight, it's frozen and flavored with sweet herbs, chilled citrus, and perhaps a splash of rosewater. You're handed a small bronze spoon. You dip it into the glistening orb and take a taste. It's cold. Startlingly so. The frankincense hits your senses like a sacred breeze, woody, lemony, tinged with something floral and ancient. The sweetness is subtle. Just enough to offset the sharp, almost pine-like flavor of the resin. You shiver slightly. It's not just cold, it's spiritual. Now here's the thing, no one can say for certain whether this kind of dish existed. But frankincense was everywhere in the court. Burned in every ritual, gifted to the gods, brought in from Punt and Arabia in massive trade expeditions. And while most historians agree it was used mainly for perfume and offerings, there's at least one ancient recipe fragment that hints it could be steeped in wine or infused in syrups. So is this sorbet historically verified? Not quite. Is it plausible that a pharaoh with unlimited servants, access to exotic ice, and a deep love of edible theatrics would try it? Absolutely, and if not Pharaoh Akhenaten, then definitely Cleopatra. The priests nod approvingly. One whispers a blessing over his scoop. Another closes his eyes after each bite, as if inhaling a vision. You glance at your own bowl, halfway empty. You're not just eating anymore. You're participating in a religious act. A culinary communion with the divine, and then, boom, a total shift in tone. The next dish. A skewer, roasted and sizzling, laid across a flat stone. Simple. Savory, but what's on it is unexpected. Locust, 6 of them. Skewered clean through. Charred wings. Caramelized edges. Dusted in some kind of salty spice. You stare, really, yes. Really, because for ancient Egyptians, locusts were more than plagues. In hard times, they were protein. Crunchy, portable, surprisingly nutritious protein. And the pharaohs? They didn't eat them out of desperation, they turned them into gourmet statements. See? Even nature's disasters taste good when I'm in charge. Some evidence even points to a locust tax in certain regions, villagers required to collect and roast swarms, partly for food, partly for offerings. They were sometimes dried, ground, and mixed with flour. But this? This is luxury locust. Seasoned, seared, and served with style. You take a bite, crunchy. Smoky. Like popcorn met roasted sunflower seeds on a desert grill. There's a depth to the flavor, spice, a little bitterness, and oddly, a sweetness near the end, like they were brushed with tamarind or molasses during roasting. Not bad. Very weird. But not bad. Historians still can't agree whether pharaohs actually consumed locusts as part of feasts, or whether they were more commonly used for feeding soldiers and commoners. But temple records show locusts depicted in ritual offerings, and some well-preserved examples were found sealed in jars, with spices. That alone makes a strong case. You wash it down with a sip of chilled water steeped in mint and hibiscus. The coolness cuts the intensity of the insects and resets your palate just in time for the next unexpected twist. Boiled bull's tail. Wait, don't panic, it's been simmered for hours in wine, onions, garlic, and coriander seeds. The meat is so tender it slides off the bone with a glance. Served in a small clay bowl, alongside sprigs of fresh parsley and a dollop of a strange, bright yellow sauce. Mustard? No. Ground fenugreek, perhaps. Or turmeric. You take a cautious taste. It's heavenly, rich, savory, gelatinous in the most comforting way. The sauce cuts through the heaviness, and the wine-soaked onions bring just the right sweetness. You never imagined you'd be savoring bull tail stew in a royal courtyard, but here you are. And here's a fun fact: this may be the most historically documented dish of the entire evening. Archaeological records mention feasts involving the tail of the white bull, often sacrificed during major ceremonies and consumed by priests or offered to the pharaoh. Bulls were sacred animals in Egyptian religion, symbols of strength, fertility, virility. Eating their tails wasn't just practical, it was powerful, but again, some scholars suggest this was symbolic. That the tail was offered and buried, not eaten. Others think only a select few were allowed to taste it, perhaps as part of a ritual induction or a fertility rite. Tonight, you get a spoonful. Or 3, and as the meat melts in your mouth, you realize, it's not just the flavor that's powerful, it's the intention. You've been eating symbols for hours. Tasting rebirth, strength, balance, even chaos. And now, with the bull's tail, perhaps you're consuming victory, or at least something that'll make you sleep with vivid dreams. The musicians resume. Harps and lutes playing a tune so slow, it's almost a lullaby. Incense curls upward in soft, sleepy spirals. The torches burn low. And your eyelids begin to feel heavy, not from exhaustion, but from fullness. From having lived 1,000 years in a single night, and there are still more dishes to come, you smile. Because of course there are. This is Pharaoh's table. You stretch slightly in your seat, your limbs heavy with fullness, your thoughts syrupy and slow. The torches flicker lazily, casting shadows that dance along the sandstone walls. Somewhere nearby, someone yawns. You're not alone in your drowsiness. But just as you're wondering if the feast might be winding down, wrong again, because now comes the soup. Yes, soup, but not just any soup. Pharaoh's blood soup, as the servants call it, which, to be clear, contains 0 actual blood. That's just the nickname. Comforting, what's actually in the black lacquered bowl set before you is a thick, ruby-colored stew. Its surface shimmers with oil. You take a cautious sniff. The aroma is intense, clove, tamarind, cinnamon bark, fermented lentils, and something faintly metallic. You lift a bronze spoon and take a sip. Oh, it's spicy. Sweet. Sour. It hits every corner of your tongue with an unexpected punch, like a well-spoken insult from someone wearing too much perfume. The texture is velvety, like creamed barley or pureed beans. There's heat from pepper, maybe ancient mustard seed or even something imported from farther east. And that deep red color? Likely from crushed carob or hibiscus and, historians suspect, sometimes enhanced with powdered ochre. This is the kind of dish meant to shock the system. To awaken. It doesn't soothe, it electrifies. Why serve this mid-feast? Because it was the Pharaoh's reset button. Ancient records suggest that heavily spiced, sour soups were served during long banquets to keep the mind alert and the digestion, let's say, on pace. Especially when the course is numbered in the dozens. Some believe it was consumed during temple fasts to simulate hunger while still offering sustenance. Others say it had aphrodisiac properties. Those same people also believe drinking a date pit boiled in goat's milk would make you irresistible. So. Grain of salt. You sip again. And feel your spine straighten just a bit. Your brain perks up. Not fully, but enough to appreciate the next item placed before you. Stuffed dormice, tiny, toasted, carefully arranged, each no bigger than your thumb, roasted golden brown and curled as if still napping. Inside, a mixture of honey-soaked grains, crushed nuts, raisins, herbs, and possibly, just possibly, a drop of wine. They look like hors d'oeuvres designed by someone with a twisted sense of humor and a flair for presentation, but this isn't a Roman feast. So what's a dormouse doing here? Turns out, while dormice are better known from Roman banquet infamy, there's some evidence that Egyptians also trapped, raised, and consumed small rodents, particularly during festival times. They were easy to breed, easy to store, alive, in jars, no less, and shockingly high in fat for such a tiny body. You pick one up. It's warm. Crispy. You take a bite, crunch, soft, sweet, savory, your face twitches. You're not sure how to feel, but you finish it, because if nothing else, you've committed to this role, and at this point, the pharaoh is probably judging you on your enthusiasm for roasted vermin. A priest leans in, amused. In times of famine, he says softly, the people ate these. But you're eating a stuffed one. You're blessed. Comforting. Let's move on, because now, thank the gods. A breath of normalcy arrives. Cucumber salad, simple, sliced cucumbers tossed with sour grape juice, mint, and crushed onion. There's even a drizzle of something white and creamy, possibly a primitive yogurt or curd. The coolness of it is divine. You eat like someone waking from a strange dream. Each bite calms you, refreshes you, pulls you gently back from the edge of hallucinating cheese and talking beetles. And here's a fun twist: cucumbers were deeply loved by Egyptians. Records show they were cultivated in palace gardens, sometimes trained up wooden frames, picked early in the morning and eaten fresh with bread. Pharaohs supposedly sent cucumbers as gifts, with accompanying letters praising their freshness and crunch. You never thought a cucumber could feel like a blessing, but then again, you've just eaten a dormouse stuffed with raisins. Now comes something aromatic, a platter of smoked goose breast, sliced thin and fanned out like the wings of the bird it once was. The scent is almost magical: peppercorns, sage, perhaps even a brush of pomegranate molasses. You pick up a piece. It's warm, rich, deeply flavorful, not greasy, but velvety, like a meat that's been pampered. And maybe it was. Goose was a high-status animal, often raised for the elite and even mummified. Mummified. Goose mummies. But tonight, this one has gone to a better place. Your plate. Egyptians believed certain animals could be sacred incarnations of gods. Geese were associated with creation myths, the great cackler, a primordial goose that laid the cosmic egg. So by eating it, you're participating in something mythic. Theologically charged. Deliciously controversial. Historians argue, were geese everyday fare? Probably not. Some say only the livers were eaten. Others insist the whole bird was stuffed, roasted, smoked, or sacrificed. Tonight, it's sliced thin and served with a sauce of ground dates and vinegar that makes your eyes roll back just a little. You've passed from weird to decadent, and as the last bite dissolves on your tongue, your gaze drifts toward the stars now rising above the courtyard. The sky is darker. The music softer. The air cooler. You are full, but not finished, because this was only part 9, and tomorrow, you may not even believe any of it happened. And here's a fun twist: cucumbers were deeply loved by Egyptians. Records show they were cultivated in palace gardens, sometimes trained up wooden frames, picked early in the morning and eaten fresh with bread. Pharaohs supposedly sent cucumbers as gifts, with accompanying letters praising their freshness and crunch. You never thought a cucumber could feel like a blessing, but then again, you've just eaten a dormouse stuffed with raisins. Now comes something aromatic, a platter of smoked goose breast, sliced thin and fanned out like the wings of the bird it once was. The scent is almost magical: peppercorns, sage, perhaps even a brush of pomegranate molasses. You pick up a piece. It's warm, rich, deeply flavorful, not greasy, but velvety, like a meat that's been pampered. And maybe it was. Goose was a high-status animal, often raised for the elite and even mummified. Mummified. Goose mummies. But tonight, this one has gone to a better place: your plate. Egyptians believed certain animals could be sacred incarnations of gods. Geese were associated with creation myths: the great cackler, a primordial goose that laid the cosmic egg. So by eating it, you're participating in something mythic. Theologically charged. Deliciously controversial. Historians argue: were geese everyday fare? Probably not. Some say only the livers were eaten. Others insist the whole bird was stuffed, roasted, smoked, or sacrificed. Tonight, it's sliced thin and served with a sauce of ground dates and vinegar that makes your eyes roll back just a little. You've passed from weird to decadent, and as the last bite dissolves on your tongue, your gaze drifts toward the stars now rising above the courtyard. The sky is darker. The music softer. The air cooler. You are full, but not finished, because this was only part 9, and tomorrow, you may not even believe any of it happened. You sit back, your belly warm and rounded like a late-day sun. Somewhere to your left, a noble snores lightly, his cheek resting against a golden platter once piled with goose. But you're hanging in there. Just barely. The torches burn low now. Fewer courses remain. You can feel it. Or maybe you just hope it, and then, something clinks. A pair of slender bronze tongs lay something long and glistening onto your plate. It twitches. No. That's your imagination. You blink. It's not a snake, more specifically, spiced serpent in lotus sauce, thin, tightly coiled slices of snake meat, grilled until lightly crisp on the outside but tender and white within, laid in a ring around a thick golden pool of sauce made from mashed lotus root, ginger-like herbs, and maybe a bit of honey. You freeze. Snake, aren't those sacred? Exactly, which is why this dish was not served lightly. In ancient Egypt, snakes were a paradox, feared for their venom, worshipped for their power. The cobra, uraeus, was the royal emblem of protection, worn on pharaohs' crowns, depicted in temple art, and invoked in prayers. Killing a sacred snake could bring down curses. But consuming one? That's complicated. Scholars argue over this practice. Some claim certain snake species were bred and harvested for ritual consumption during moon festivals or protection rites. Others deny that eating serpent ever occurred, insisting that references to the devouring of chaos were symbolic. And yet, here it is, on your plate. You lift a piece with cautious fingers. It's firm, smelling slightly of garlic and firewood. You bite, and to your surprise, it's good, gamey. A bit like chicken, if chicken were smaller and had spent its life sunbathing on limestone. The sauce is thick, earthy, floral, lotus root mashed to a paste, then spiced with coriander and a whisper of cinnamon. There's heat, too. Something peppery that tickles your nose. It's not just edible, it's strangely addictive. You take another bite, this time more confidently, and now the priest beside you leans in, voice like sand shifting in silk. To eat the serpent, he says, is to take in the chaos and defeat it from within. You nod. That's dramatic. But also fair. A few bites later, you realize the serpent is gone, and your sense of fear has been replaced by curiosity. What could possibly follow a venomous delicacy? Apparently, flour jelly. A shallow bowl arrives, shimmering under the torchlight, filled with a translucent, gently wobbling dome the color of a sunset. It glistens with flecks of gold leaf and crushed herbs. Suspended within are petals, blue lotus, rose, maybe hibiscus. You lean in. The scent is sweet. Dreamy, you dip your spoon in and taste, it's cool. Silky. Barely sweet, with a floral tang that lingers at the top of your mouth. The texture is like nothing you've had all night. Your teeth don't so much chew it as glide through it. It is, in a word, peaceful. Some historians argue that the Egyptians had early versions of gelatin, made not from modern processes but from boiled animal parts, reduced with honey, cooled in stone basins, and flavored with flower extracts. Others claim such things were only used for perfume or ritual cosmetics, not for eating, but this jelly feels more than edible, it feels like a pause button for the soul. And yet, the next dish is already arriving, because pharaohs never just pause. Liver of sacred ibis, roasted and wrapped in fig leaves. Yes, you heard that right, the ibis, long-legged, sharp-beaked, revered messenger of Thoth, god of wisdom, was often mummified and buried by the thousands. But a small minority of texts reference a dish so rare, so sacred, it was only served during the feast of the scribes, a secret of celebration honoring divine knowledge. That dish? Roasted ibis liver. Yes, you heard that right. The ibis, long-legged, sharp-beaked, revered messenger of Thoth, god of wisdom, was often mummified and buried by the thousands. But a small minority of texts reference a dish so rare, so sacred, it was only served during the feast of the scribes, a secret of celebration honoring divine knowledge. That dish? Roasted ibis liver. Its taste, you're told, is rich, more intense than duck, sharper than chicken, and with a texture that almost melts under your tongue. The fig leaf wrapping gives it sweetness, the roasting adds a smoky perfume, and the spices, cumin, thyme, maybe even dried celery seed, bring balance. You take a small bite, and it is wise. Or maybe it just tastes that way. Either way, you feel smarter. Or at least like you're hallucinating a little less. As you chew, a thought occurs, these meals are not just nourishment. They are ceremony. A living ritual in which each bite is a prayer, each flavor a verse. And your body? A temple, that's probably the lotus jelly talking. Then, something beautiful, cracked date cookies, fresh from the clay oven, simple. Rustic. Still warm, made of crushed dates, emmer flour, and wild bee honey. Pressed into soft rounds, cracked open slightly at the top, and sprinkled with sesame seeds, you break one in half, the steam rises, you bite, it's chewy, sweet, and real. Comfort food at its ancient best. No symbolism. No venom. Just a perfect, time-tested treat, and as the flavors settle over your tongue, you feel it, the feast is finally slowing. The music is softer now, almost silent. The torches have grown low, just embers in the bowls. The servants are quieter. Even the pharaoh leans back in his seat, hands folded. One final drink is offered, a warm cup, infused with cinnamon, crushed myrrh, and boiled fig skins. You sip, and close your eyes, there is still more to come. But for now, your stomach is a palace. Your senses, ancient. And your dreams, they're beginning to stir. The world now feels quieter. Even the insects in the palm trees seem to hum in slower rhythm. Your stomach is full, your breath warm, your fingers sticky with honey and herb. But the feast is not yet over. Not while the pharaoh remains upright, his eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight like a lion who's tasted victory, and dessert, another dish arrives. Small. Unassuming, a single, folded triangle of dough. Crisp, golden, barely the size of your palm. No sauce. No garnish. You glance at the server, she just nods, you take a bite, it shatters, flaky, light, buttery, if such a thing existed then, and filled with something unexpected, a spiced mash of lentils, crushed garlic. And dried fish? No, more delicate. Maybe fermented river perch, and then it hits you, a smoky aftertaste. Intense. Intriguing. Slightly alarming, because you've just encountered one of ancient Egypt's strangest flavor pairings, fermented fish pastry. There are actual temple records, believe it or not, that refer to preserved Nile fish being mashed into pastes and used in royal kitchens, not just as seasoning, but as central ingredients. Garum-like sauces. Savory fillings. Flavor bombs tucked into bread like edible scrolls of warning. This dish is the closest thing the ancient Egyptians had to junk food with attitude, and it is delicious. Some historians argue these fermented pastes were only used by lower classes, while others point to evidence of spiced versions appearing in palace inventories. A few dusty papyri even list ingredients for something shockingly close to this, though no exact measurements, of course. Ancient recipes were more vibe than precision. You take another bite, and that's when your tongue catches something sharp. Not painful, just pointed, a pine nut, roasted. Hidden like treasure in the middle. Pine nuts were rare. Imported, hoarded, blessed. Used in ceremonies involving rebirth and long life. In food, they were ground into cakes or sprinkled into stews. But this? This is an amuse-bouche worthy of a pharaoh's practical joke. Surprise fish guts and forest seeds. You grin, the musicians pluck at their strings again, soft, playful, like they're in on it too, then comes the most unexpected sound of all, laughter, from the pharaoh himself, a quiet chuckle. Short. But unmistakable, he just watched you eat ancient fish pie and smile, that earns respect. You think you're done, but of course, you're not, because now, as if summoned by your last ounce of curiosity, a servant steps forward holding a shallow plate covered with what looks like black sand. No explanation. No flourish, she sets it down and walks away. You lean in, it's not sand, it's tiny black sesame seeds, roasted until they shine like obsidian and smell like smoke and oil. Scattered across the seeds, beetles, tiny. Roasted. Seasoned. Crisped, you blink, not again, yes. Again, this is Pharaoh's dust. A snack. A riddle. A power move, the beetles are dusted with dried thyme and dried date powder. Some are whole, others crushed. You're told it's a mixture of desert insects, roasted just enough to preserve crunch but leave behind none of the squick. You pinch a few and toss them into your mouth. Crunch, nutty. Savory. Not bad at all. Insects, after all, were a normal protein source in ancient times, and to the pharaoh, who claimed ownership over everything from cattle to clouds, insects were yet another resource. If it buzzed, crawled, or scurried, it could be eaten. Historians remain split over this. Most agree locusts were consumed. Some believe beetles were dried and ground into flour. A few even think Pharaoh's dust was real, though perhaps more as a joke dish or test of bravery than a daily snack. You pass the test. You finish your plate, and then, finally, the tide begins to recede. The servers move with a different rhythm now. Slower. More reverent, one carries a wide bowl filled with ashes. At least, that's what it looks like. You glance sideways, the person next to you scoops some and eats it, so you follow, you lift a spoonful. It's not ashes, it's a charcoal custard, smooth. Inky gray. Topped with a drizzle of fig syrup and a few dried rose petals, the flavor is mellow. Slightly bitter. A hint of sweet. It's made from burnt date pits, crushed charcoal from specific trees considered sacred, and goat's milk reduced to a creamy base. You didn't expect the final course to taste like quiet. But it does. The custard doesn't wow or excite. It settles, like a closing note in a long, complex song. Some say charcoal dishes were used to purify the body after ritual feasting. Others suggest they were medicinal, meant to absorb toxins, real or symbolic. There's even a temple tablet that refers to a dark bowl that swallows the fire of the feast. You now know what that means. You exhale, the bowl is cleared, no more platters arrive, the flutes taper off, and someone somewhere rings a tiny copper bell. The feast is over, but sleep? Not quite, because tonight is still heavy with ancient air, and your eyes are just now beginning to close. There are 9 more parts ahead. But for now, you drift. You must have dozed for a second. The world feels slower now, blurred like warm honey dripping from a ladle. The torchlight flickers against your closed eyelids, and somewhere deep in the courtyard, a servant gently clears bowls with the grace of someone not wanting to wake a sleeping lion, but your eyes open again when you catch the scent of smoke and fruit, and just like that, you're back. Another dish has arrived, charred melon, yes, melon. But not how you've ever had it. Thick slices of honey-sweet melon, fire-roasted until the edges caramelize, their juices bubbling at the seams. The heat has darkened the sugars into something almost toffee-like. A final drizzle of tamarisk sap gives it a smoky, citrus tang. You lift a slice, steam curls upward, you take a bite, and it's as if someone turned summer into an incense stick. Soft, smoky, sticky, with that ancient edge of something almost floral. This wasn't just dessert, it was cleansing. A palate reset. Or maybe a secret ritual disguised as a fruit course. Melons, surprisingly, were grown all along the Nile. Ancient wall paintings show them harvested in royal gardens. Pharaohs believed they were cooling to the body, good for digestion, and possibly even a mild aphrodisiac. Some records mention melons as offerings, placed beside jars of beer and honey in burial tombs. A few even describe them as gifts of Ra. Still, roasting them? That's debated. Some historians believe melons were mostly eaten raw or dried. Others think they were baked into pastries, boiled into syrups, or, yes, roasted in open flame to bring out their sweetness during feasts. You're now firmly on team roasted, and before you can get too philosophical about grilled fruit, the next plate arrives, silken eel in date glaze. Let's just pause there. Eel, yes, eel, a long, glistening strip of Nile eel, coiled in a tight spiral, its dark skin slightly crisped, its interior impossibly soft. Drizzled in a glaze of mashed black dates, vinegar, and what might be powdered clove or even burnt honey, you hesitate. Then again, why hesitate now? You slice a bite, soft as butter, and raise it to your lips. Oh, it melts. Eel tastes like the richest piece of fish you've ever had, but deeper, earthier. And here, that intense date glaze wraps around the savory richness like silk on obsidian. It's sweet, smoky, a little funky. The kind of flavor that makes your eyebrows twitch in surprise. Some records mention Nile eels being caught in large traps and presented at festivals honoring the river gods. Others suggest eels were considered too mystical to eat, seen as divine messengers or reincarnated spirits. But then again, we know the pharaohs did as they pleased, and tonight, you do too. You polish off the eel and notice, fewer dishes are arriving now. The pace is different. Slower. Final, and the next item? It's not even on a plate, it's wrapped in papyrus, yes, actual thin sheaves of plant fiber, twisted like a scroll. A server unrolls it slowly, revealing salt-cured duck heart, pressed and dried and rubbed with crushed thyme and coriander. It's barely larger than a walnut. You pick it up. Still warm from resting on hot stones. You bite into it, it's chewy. Savory. A little intense, it tastes like fire and patience. Hearts were sacred to the Egyptians. They believed the heart was the seat of intelligence, memory, and emotion, more important than the brain. In the afterlife, hearts were weighed against the feather of Ma'at to determine a soul's worth. So why eat one? Because power. Consuming a heart, particularly of a sacred animal, was said to transfer strength, vitality, and perhaps even a fragment of spirit. Especially during the Feast of Courage, a celebration mentioned in only one surviving tablet, likely linked to the New Kingdom period. Historians dispute this wildly. Some argue the heart was never eaten. Others insist only pharaohs or war generals were allowed such a privilege. Some even believe it was part of a fertility rite. As usual, mystery, but there's no mystery in your mouth, just salt, iron, and fire. You're given a sip of sour grape wine to wash it down. Then, unexpectedly, candy, yes. Candy, tiny, hand-rolled balls of sesame and honey. Mixed with crushed nuts, wrapped in dried lotus petals. They taste like warmth and temples. They taste like the kind of dessert a priest would sneak from the altar and pretend was part of the ritual, sticky, nutty, a little floral, no symbolism. No ritual. Just comfort. This was a common treat in many households, but for the pharaoh, it was elevated. Sprinkled with powdered cinnamon. Dusted with fine flour. Served with figs carved into tiny animal shapes. One of the date animals on your plate looks like a lion. You eat it, no regrets. Then comes one final surprise, mystery stew. That's what the priest calls it with a wink. It arrives in a lidded ceramic jar, steaming slightly. Inside, a thick, reddish broth. Chunks of something soft, maybe yam, maybe root vegetables, float beside what might be mushrooms. The smell. Almost like peanuts. Earthy. Deep. You dip in your spoon, and taste a stew so comforting, so ancient, it feels like a hug from someone who lived 4,000 years ago. It's warm, simple, soothing, possibly made from lentils, wild onions, nuts, and ground chickpeas. No meat. Just deep, rich flavor. One of the earliest one-pot meals humanity ever created, and as you eat it, you realize, this is the food of pharaohs not at their most extravagant, but at their most human. And it is, perfect, the bowl is emptied. Your breath slows, somewhere beyond the torchlight, a wind rustles the papyrus reeds, like the Nile itself is whispering, rest, little one. And you will, but not quite yet, because the dream feast still has more to offer. The night is thick with silence now. Not an uncomfortable silence, but the kind that settles into the corners of your mind like warm dust. The kind that makes even your thoughts want to whisper, you're full, but not just of food. Full of symbols. Of questions. Of smoke and syrup and sacred birds. The kind of fullness that happens when a meal becomes a memory you haven't finished living yet, so naturally, here comes another dish. This one arrives on a narrow wooden plank. Laid out delicately are 3 small, glistening discs of something dark and glossy. You squint. They almost look like coins, salted ox tongue medallions, each is about the size of your thumb, lightly grilled. And brushed with a mixture of pomegranate molasses and beer reduction. A dusting of what might be dried leek powder gives them a faint green shimmer. You take a bite, oh, they're tender, more tender than you expect. Rich like roast beef but silkier. The sweetness of the pomegranate cuts through the dense savoriness, and a hint of ale bitterness lingers at the edges of your tongue. Tongue may not sound glamorous, but in ancient Egypt, it was a luxury. Reserved. Celebrated. Offered to gods and pharaohs during new moon ceremonies or royal birthdays. Some scholars say tongue was considered an embodiment of speech itself, of divine language. To eat it was to consume wisdom, persuasion. The very breath of command. Others argue it was just a delicacy, marinated and stored in clay jars, brought out on feast days for high-ranking priests. Tonight? It's soft, spiced, and honestly, you'd eat a second serving, but your stomach begs you not to. Still, before you can decide, something entirely different is placed in front of you, fermented garlic custard. No, really, it arrives in a tiny alabaster cup, pale beige with a swirl of olive oil and a single red clover flower floating on top. You smell it, your eyebrows rise. It's intense, sweet, pungent, like garlic had a long, philosophical conversation with yogurt and regret. You hesitate, but, why not? You dip your spoon, the texture is smooth, almost foamy, like whipped hummus. The flavor? Startling. Sharp, fermented garlic at first, powerful and vinegary, then mellowing into creamy tang and finishing with a clean sweetness. this is not the garlic butter of modern comfort food. This is warrior food. Fermented garlic was known in ancient Egypt as both food and medicine. Some believed it restored virility, warded off curses, and even scared away certain demons. To be fair, it would. Historians debate its actual usage. Was it fermented intentionally? Or was that just what happened in the desert heat? Some say pharaohs kept jars of aged garlic under their beds. Others believe this was peasant food, elevated by accident. Who knows? All you know is, you just ate a garlic cloud, and you liked it. Next comes a welcome break, chilled palm wine, served in a wide clay cup. This fermented beverage is cloudy, cool, and surprisingly fizzy. It tastes like sweet bread met sour apple juice and got slightly tipsy. Palm wine was often consumed during religious festivals, fermented quickly, shared widely, sometimes mixed with herbs or honey for added kick. It's refreshing. Light. You take a sip, then another, and just like that, your palate resets again. Just in time, because now you're handed a spoonful of sun, that's what the servant calls it. You stare at the offering, a golden paste served on a wide date leaf. It's soft, thick, and glowing like it was scooped from the horizon itself. Bee larva paste, mixed with honey, wild pollen, and saffron. You glance around, everyone else is eating it like it's normal. You shrug and take a taste. It's bright. That's the only word, bright and nutty and rich, with the texture of whipped butter and the intensity of sunshine and nectar. There's something primal about it. Something that makes your cells lean forward and say, oh, that's food. The pharaoh's court believed in eating power, and bee larvae were viewed as concentrated life, tiny symbols of rebirth, wrapped in honey and consumed before major spiritual transitions. Some say they were only eaten before battle. Others think they were medicine for fatigue. Or even fertility charms. But whatever their original purpose, this paste is alive. Not literally, but it feels like it. And finally, to cool your buzzing mouth, you're handed a dish of blue lotus gel. Translucent. Quivering. Almost not real, the spoon slides in like it's parting a dream. You taste, and everything slows down. It's floral. Lightly sweet. Slightly bitter. Faintly numbing. Like the ghost of a mint tea that fell asleep in a garden full of lilies, blue lotus was sacred. A symbol of resurrection. A mild sedative, even. Pharaohs were buried with it. Priests brewed it into tonics. Some say it made you see the gods. Others say it just made you nap with flair. Either way, you are now officially floating. Your breath deepens. Your arms feel like sandbags wrapped in silk. The torchlight dances lower. There are still 7 parts ahead, but here, with blue lotus in your mouth and garlic in your heart, you rest. You don't notice at first when the music stops. It's not abrupt, it's just gone. Like the night decided to hum instead. The torches are dying now, replaced by small oil lamps flickering like sleepy eyes. A faint breeze glides over the marble floor, carrying the scent of lotus and old stone, and yet, there's still food coming. You hear the soft clink of metal on ceramic as the next course arrives, a shallow bowl, at the center, cooked ostrich egg, sliced open like a treasure chest. The yolk is a deep, almost bronze color. The whites, firm and glistening with a touch of oil. It's been slow roasted over coals, then topped with chopped dates, dried thyme, and what appears to be shaved goat cheese. You lean in, the smell is surprisingly mild. Warm. Earthy, you dip a piece of flatbread into the yolk and take a bite. It's rich. Creamy. More intense than a chicken egg, but less sulfurous than you feared. The date brings sweetness, the herbs bring edge, and the goat cheese brings, well, something tangy and vaguely rebellious. Ostrich eggs weren't everyday fare. They were ceremonial, symbolic of fertility, rebirth, and solar power. Some tombs contain entire eggs, decorated and placed beside mummified pets. Others show depictions of eggs being cracked open during feasts of the sun. Whether pharaohs regularly ate them is debated. Some say yes, especially during solstice rituals. Others argue they were too sacred to be consumed. But considering your tongue is now coated in roasted fertility, you'd say the evidence favors appetite, and yet, before you can finish your egg, the servers arrive with something even stranger, crisped hyena marrow. Wait. What? Yes. Hyena, specifically, the bones, cracked and roasted until the marrow bubbles out like ancient butter, then scooped and served over strips of grilled flatbread. You pause, this is next level, even for pharaohs. Hyenas were both feared and respected in ancient Egypt. Symbols of chaos, scavenging, and sometimes even regeneration. Some records indicate that hyenas were hunted and consumed in small, symbolic amounts, usually during rituals designed to tame wildness. The marrow is sticky. Smoky. It smells like charcoal and earth. You taste, it's bold. Meaty. A little funky. Like someone grilled a thunderstorm and drizzled it with oil. But the bread beneath gives it balance, and the flavors, while wild, are oddly comforting. Historians still can't agree if pharaohs ate hyena meat or just used it in ritual offerings. One old temple inscription mentions marrow of the untamed one, but whether that's metaphor or menu item remains unclear. Tonight, though, it's both. You swallow slowly, the richness sits in your chest like a memory trying to hatch, then comes something soft, a bowl of steamed fig dumplings in wine broth. Finally, something with no teeth. The dumplings are delicate, small balls of fig paste and flour, folded into linen and steamed over herb water. The wine broth smells like cloves and cinnamon bark. You spoon one into your mouth, it collapses. Sweet, warm, slightly chewy, the broth fills the rest of your senses with heat and floral spice. You can almost feel it sink into your bones, as if preparing you for hibernation. Figs were everywhere in Egyptian cuisine. Dried, fresh, mashed, fermented. Carved into symbols. They were thought to be gifts from Hathor, the goddess of love and pleasure. Some temples even had fig groves planted just for her ceremonies, and while fig dumplings aren't preserved in recipes, versions of them exist in many ancient cultures. Sweet dough, stuffed with fruit, steamed in leaves or fabric, practical and indulgent. You eat two more without thinking, then something else is placed in front of you. Something cold, a small pyramid of ice. Wait, ice. In Egypt, yes. Rare, imported, precious ice, collected from desert caves or brought down from higher elevations in clay jars wrapped in wet linen. And in this case, packed tightly around a dollop of date and rose petal sorbet. It glows faintly in the torchlight, pale pink and gold. You take a spoon, it is divine, cold, floral, sweet with a whisper of bitterness. It's like licking the memory of a summer garden, and suddenly, the entire feast feels distant. You've eaten so many things. Symbolic things. Wild things. Sacred things, and now this, simple, quiet, pure. Some records describe pharaohs receiving chilled desserts, especially during the hottest months. Fruit pastes cooled over river ice. Sweetened with honey and served in alabaster dishes. Only the wealthiest, only the most powerful, could afford such extravagance, and yet, here you are, you close your eyes. Let the ice melt on your tongue, you don't even notice the next course arriving. Dust cakes, you open your eyes, they're tiny. Crumbly. Grayish beige. Dusted with ash or maybe fine ground charcoal. Each is shaped like a tiny ankh, the symbol of life. You pick one up, it crumbles instantly. The taste is dry but oddly pleasant, like ground almonds, flour, smoke, and a whisper of honey. A finishing bite. An edible period at the end of a long sentence. These cakes aren't meant to delight. They're meant to settle. To pull you gently back to the ground after a night of floating. Some scholars believe these were funeral foods, offered to the dead, but also consumed by the living to honor transitions. Ash as purification. Sweetness as comfort. Form as meaning. You finish the cake, and then, for the first time all night, no new dish arrives, the servant bows, the music doesn't resume. Instead, a long, slow breath seems to roll through the room. As if everyone, Pharaoh included, is exhaling together. The feast is ending, but not yet done. 7 more parts await, and you're ready to dream them. The lamps burn lower now, just blue flames licking quietly in shallow bowls. Somewhere in the shadows, a handbell chimes once, clear, soft, final. The kind of sound that says, the sacred part begins here. You straighten without thinking. Your body, full of food and stories, still recognizes ritual. A procession enters, not of dancers. Not musicians, servers, carrying darkness on plates. The first dish is set before you with reverence. It looks like polished black stone. Glossy. Still steaming slightly. A wedge is already cut. The server whispers, obsidian bread. Yes, really, you lift a piece. It's warm, dense, and unusually heavy. You tear it open. The interior is dark. Almost blue. It smells of molasses, ground seed, and smoke. You take a bite. Oh, it's bittersweet. Earthy. A little nutty. There's some kind of ash or black cumin mixed in, and maybe roasted carob, or even fermented barley. This is not breakfast bread, it's ceremonial. Bread was the beating heart of ancient Egyptian food culture. But this version, obsidian bread, was likely reserved for rare rituals. The shape, the ingredients, even the color all point toward symbolism, life and death, darkness and transformation. Some tombs have carvings of breads with similar descriptions, given to gods during eclipses or as offerings to Osiris. Historians debate what made them so black. Burnt grains, ash from sacred fires, crushed legumes. Whatever the case, this bread tastes like night itself, and somehow, it soothes you. The next course arrives in silence, a slab of pickled crocodile tail, cut thin and served chilled over bitter herbs. You blink. Yes, that's a lot to take in, but crocodiles were sacred in Egypt. Symbols of power, control, chaos. Associated with Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of the Nile and fertility. And while these animals were worshipped in some temples, they were also hunted, occasionally even eaten. You pick up a slice. It's marbled, firm, and smells vaguely of vinegar and lemon peel. You chew. It's like firm white fish, but meatier. The pickling gives it a tart edge, while the bitter herbs underneath, likely chicory or wild arugula, cleanse the bite afterward. It's not your favorite dish, but it feels important. There's a power in it, like chewing on a prayer. Some scholars deny this practice ever happened. Why would you eat something sacred? They argue. Others counter, because nothing is more sacred than strength. The answer? Maybe both. Before your mind can wander too far into theology, the next course makes its appearance, and it's tiny, preserved quail eggs. Arranged like a necklace of moons. Each is dusted in powdered cumin and sprinkled with ground lotus seed. They glisten under the torchlight, soft and spotted. You lift one. It's warm. The shell has already been peeled. You bite. The yolk is creamy. The white is springy. The seasoning, earthy and floral. It's like eating the Nile in miniature. Eggs like these would have been offered to gods during planting festivals, symbols of rebirth, moon cycles, and fertility. Occasionally, they were served to pharaohs during first fruit ceremonies, paired with spring herbs and root cakes. They are humble. Elegant. You eat another, and another, then pause when something unexpected arrives. Burnt sugar ash, a dark mound in a shallow bowl. It crackles faintly when touched, like cooling lava. On top, 3 dried rose petals. Nothing more. You take a cautious taste. It crunches, it dissolves, and suddenly, it's everywhere, smoky. Sweet. Bitter. Almost burnt caramel, but with a sharpness that wakes your jaw. It's made, likely, from over-reduced date syrup, cooked in clay pots until scorched, then ground and served warm. This isn't dessert, it's a ritual cleanser. Some say these were given at the end of long feasts to reset the mouth and clear spiritual cloying. Others say they were used to burn away excess joy, so the gods wouldn't grow jealous of too much pleasure. You're not sure which theory is correct, but you're grateful for the contrast, and just when you think the flavors can't go any deeper, you're handed a cup, ox blood and pomegranate tonic. Not actual blood, not tonight. just a thick drink made from boiled pomegranate juice, crushed barley malt, and powdered spices meant to simulate the rich, iron taste of blood. Some ceremonies involved symbolic drinks like this, used during rites of strength or mourning. You sip. It's tangy, complex, slightly metallic, a bit like if you juiced a thunderstorm and aged it in clay, and then comes the calm. The next dish is a linen-wrapped almond cake, scented with myrrh and bound in date syrup. It's soft, dense, fragrant, almost like perfume in solid form. You unwrap it carefully, break off a piece, eat, and suddenly, you're a temple offering. A story folded in honey. These cakes were likely funeral food, served during Second Life celebrations, where the pharaoh's journey through the underworld was reenacted through symbolic dishes. You wonder now, have you been eating your way through a myth this whole time? The last bite settles in your chest. And you notice. The silence is deeper, someone somewhere yawns, the lamps dim further, there are 5 more courses ahead, but in this moment, wrapped in myrrh and memory, you could sleep right here on the stone floor. The room feels like it's breathing now, not the people, the room. The heat from the oil lamp sways like lungs inhaling and exhaling around you. Every now and then, a reed mat creaks softly as someone shifts, too full to move but too enchanted to sleep. Even the pharaoh is still, his silhouette backlit by a flickering golden glow, face unreadable. You are more than full. You are myth-stuffed, and yet. Here it comes, one more dish. It arrives in a shallow alabaster bowl, small enough to rest in both your palms. Whipped marrow pudding. The idea alone makes your stomach blink twice, but then you smell it, a warm sweetness. Cinnamon. Maybe coriander. A faint smokiness underneath. You dip your spoon, it's smooth. Surprisingly light. Cream-colored with little golden specks on top, crushed pistachios. You take a bite. Oh. Oh wow, it's like bone broth fell in love with rice pudding and they eloped in a desert monastery. Silky. Rich. Slightly savory at first, then melting into warmth and sweetness. A perfect balance of nourishment and indulgence. Marrow was considered life essence in ancient Egypt. Not just food, but medicine. Ritual priests believed it could restore energy, especially when whipped and combined with milk, fig paste, or honey. Some even believed it could extend youth, an elixir in pudding form. Historians debate whether it was ever made like this, so delicate, so decadent. But archaeological traces show utensils and bowls likely used for similar preparations. You finish the pudding and feel your body thank you. Then, the next offering, something quiet. Simple, a single roasted grape leaf, filled with crushed chickpeas, wild herbs, and dried shrimp. Rolled tight. Brushed with oil. Still warm, you pop the whole thing into your mouth. It's bright. Citrusy. Slightly briny. The leaf offers a soft bitterness, the filling, a dance of textures. It's not trying to impress you. It's just true. Stuffed leaves, or dolma-like dishes, were common in many ancient cuisines. Egyptian versions likely used local herbs, lentils, and sometimes bits of dried fish or insects. For pharaohs, the ingredients would be finer, rarer, like sun-dried shrimp from northern marshes and salt-cured chickpeas from temple farms. You eat it slowly. Like you're unwrapping a poem, and then something bold arrives, a cup of hot onion nectar. Yes. Onion. In a cup. Warmed until sweet, you stare at the amber liquid, skeptical. You sip, and, oh, it's delicious. It tastes like roasted caramel and autumn wind. Sweet, with a tiny whisper of garlic. There's nutmeg in there too, maybe even a hint of dates. This isn't soup. It's tonic. Onions were everywhere in ancient Egypt, medicine, food, even spiritual offering. Priests swore by their cleansing properties. Builders were paid in them. Pharaohs included them in tombs, but sweetened, sipped slowly in a cup. That's different. This might have been a temple healer's invention, or a luxury twist made just for royalty after feasting. A kind of gentle way to settle the belly and clear the head. You feel your thoughts line up neatly after each sip. Then comes another plate, covered. It's uncovered with care to reveal braised locust wings over a mound of fermented grain mash. They shimmer like tiny copper leaves. You blink. Then sigh. Why not? You pick up a fork and taste. Crunchy. Delicate. Surprisingly nutty. The fermented grain is soft, warm, tangy, somewhere between risotto and sourdough. The wings offer texture. A faint chili-like heat at the end surprises you. Locusts were eaten during lean seasons, but also during festivals meant to mark rebirth and survival. Some papyri mention entire ceremonies involving roasted swarms. Others suggest the pharaohs had private versions of the dish, elevated with spices and grain reserves from temple stores. It's not just food, it's a reminder, you are still here. And then, peace, crushed almond and fig paste, shaped into tiny scarabs. You smile, each one is hand-formed, smoothed with oil, and pressed with a carved wooden mold. Just 2 bites each. Slightly sticky. Faintly spiced, you take one, it dissolves into a memory of harvest, sweet figs, crunchy almonds, a touch of cinnamon, and something, rose-like. These were likely temple confections, reserved for equinox offerings. Some historians believe scarab-shaped sweets were given to scribes during calendar festivals. Others say it was purely symbolic, sacred shapes offered to sacred bellies. But this? This is comfort food for the cosmos. The last bite is almost too soft to chew. And now, the final course of the night's sacred meal, a drink, served in a deep blue glass, shaped like a lotus bulb, black barley and carob tea, thickened with a dash of goat milk and sweetened with wildflower honey. You lift it to your lips and take a slow sip, warm, smooth, just barely sweet. It tastes like dusk. Like stories fading into dreams, the barley brings weight. The carob brings darkness. The honey lifts it all like a lullaby. This is not a drink to wake you, it is a drink to lower you gently into sleep. No one speaks now. Even the servers seem to vanish, their soft footsteps swallowed by the stone floor. The room hums with fullness, and so do you. Only 4 more parts remain. But now, you are more than a guest at this feast, you are part of it. At this point, the line between dream and feast has thinned to almost nothing. You sit in stillness, the last sips of black barley tea warm in your chest, your limbs draped like soft cloth over the stone bench. The torches are no longer flames, they're just amber blurs. Shadows lengthen across the floor like ink bleeding through old papyrus, and then, barely more than a breath, smoke, not fire smoke. Resin. Incense, a new procession approaches. This time, the servers carry not trays, but small incense burners in one hand. And in the other, wooden ladles, the dish, frankincense broth, yes. You heard that right, frankincense, the ancient resin burned in temples, now dissolved in a milky, warm drink the color of ivory. There's also honey, coriander, maybe even a touch of fig milk. It steams gently in the bowl, curling scents of temples, libraries, and prayers around your face. You sip, your tongue tingles, it's floral, slightly spicy, and medicinal, but not in a bad way. It coats your throat like velvet incense. This was more than food, this was ritual. Frankincense was used in healing ceremonies, purification rites, and even in mummification. Some records hint that it was consumed in small doses, dissolved into warm drinks or oils, especially during times of mourning or prophecy. Historians disagree. Some say the pharaohs never ingested it. Others insist it was a secret tonic for divine visions. Right now, it tastes like silence made liquid. Then, without announcement, you're handed something that crackles in your palm, dried lotus stem. It's been roasted, dusted in sea salt, and lightly glazed with fermented honey. Like a potato chip sent back in time and made sacred, you crunch it, satisfying. Earthy. Almost nutty. Lotus wasn't just a flower, it was the flower. A symbol of creation, rebirth, the sun itself. Pharaohs were buried with them. Temples lined pools with them. And yes, the stems were eaten, boiled, roasted, even preserved. The taste? Like roasted celery if it studied poetry. The next dish is peculiar. a mound of red sand cakes, soft, crumbly, warm. Colored with ochre, spiced with desert herbs and just a hint of vinegar. The texture is like shortbread kissed by a sandstorm. You take a bite, it melts instantly. Dry, then savory, then sharp, these were likely ceremonial offerings once, representing the red lands, the desert chaos that lay beyond the Nile's green lifeline. Eating them was a way to acknowledge danger, then neutralize it. Pharaohs supposedly consumed these cakes during border ceremonies, or after returning from war. Scholars still debate their exact use. Some think they were only for burial rituals. Others say they were a common New Kingdom palate cleanser. Either way, they are unexpectedly grounding. Then comes something even simpler, a slab of grilled papyrus root, charred at the edges, drizzled with sour grape oil and salt. You pause. Papyrus. Like writing material, yes, but also a plant. Its root, starchy and fibrous, once used in stews, broths, and yes, even grilled. You bite into it, chewy. Earthy. A little bitter, it tastes like parchment flavored by the Nile. Like something that wants to be food but still remembers being scripture. The pharaohs, especially those with priestly bloodlines, were said to eat papyrus root before temple fasts. As a way to balance the physical and the divine. You're not sure about the spiritual part, but your jaw's getting a workout, and now, after all the strangeness, something familiar, but only at first glance, a bowl of fruit, but not just any fruit. Each piece is carved into the shape of a god. A mango slice becomes Horus. A fig, shaped like Isis. A piece of carob cut into a tiny Anubis with gleaming black glaze. It's dessert and theology, all in one. You nibble at Horus's wing. Chewy. Sweet. Slightly fermented. The glaze is like molasses and salt. This was not just for pleasure. Fruit carving in ancient Egypt was a high art. Reserved for temple banquets and pharaohs' death anniversaries. Some believed eating god-shaped food allowed one to ingest protection. Others considered it a performance, an edible retelling of the mythos. You try not to feel weird biting into a fruit god, but it's delicious, and that makes it easier. The final dish of the night arrives in a sealed bowl. Steam curls out when the lid is lifted. Milk of the moon, a soft porridge made from goat milk, crushed barley, and white poppy seeds. It's pale, almost glowing, with thin strips of candied lotus root floating on top. You take a spoonful, and it's peace, mild, silky, lightly sweet. The kind of flavor that doesn't ask anything of you. It just holds you. This was a bedtime food, according to old healer scrolls. Said to quiet the mind, ease the breath, prepare the soul for dream journeying. The pharaohs? They had an entire chamber just for consuming it. You imagine lying back on a stone couch in that room, belly full, eyes half closed, a servant whispering lullabies from the Book of the Dead in a voice made of rose water and velvet. That's what this tastes like. The bowl is taken, no words are spoken. The pharaoh rises slowly, so do you. 3 more parts remain, but tonight, you could float down the Nile on your own heartbeat. Everything is soft now. The air. The light. Even your thoughts. It feels like you're walking underwater, except warmer, and somehow, slower. Your fingers trail against the smooth, cool wall of the chamber as you move, led by silence, guided by flickering shadows. You're not returning to a table this time. You're being escorted to a smaller chamber, intimate, scented with blue lotus and cedarwood. The walls are lined with tapestries, and there's a low, cushioned platform waiting in the center. You lie down, as instructed. Another course, no, a ritual, but there's still something to eat. The priest enters. Yes, a real one this time. White linen robes, gold-edged collar, expression carved from marble. He carries a tiny obsidian bowl, no larger than your palm. Inside, black honey pearls. You blink, each pearl is a glossy bead, perfectly round, rolled in powdered coriander and resting on a leaf. They shimmer like the night sky bottled up into candy. The priest places the bowl beside you, then disappears without a word. You lift one pearl, it's cool. Sticky. Smells faintly of smoke and spice. You pop it into your mouth. It explodes into darkness and fire. not literal fire, but intensity. The honey has been smoked, aged, maybe even fermented. It tastes ancient and powerful. Like the Nile swallowed the sun and offered it back as candy, these pearls were rumored to be used in dreaming rites, taken before visions, prophecies, or symbolic rebirths. Only pharaohs and certain high priests were permitted. They were said to soften the soul for messages. Historians, they bicker about whether these pearls were real, metaphorical, or just poetic exaggerations. A few jars found in tombs contain sticky residue that could match the description. What you know, your body responds instantly, your heart slows. Your eyes grow heavy, and yet, there's more. A thin slice of dried crocodile fruit, no relation to the animal. It's a leathery crimson piece, shaped like a teardrop, and tastes like a mix of tamarind, plum, and windburn. It was used to dry the mouth before death, according to one cryptic funerary text. You're not dying, don't worry, but the symbolism is poetic, preparing for passage. Next, a small cup of sleeping oil, not actual oil, but a syrupy drink made from blue lotus extract, crushed mint, and a tiny pinch of poppy seed milk. The texture is like warm tea that's forgotten it used to be water. You sip, and everything in you says, yes. Yes, it's time to sleep. The blue lotus swirls through your mind like gentle vines. The mint cools your chest. The poppy. Well, the poppy whispers. This drink was not part of every feast, but during lunar ceremonies, pharaohs ended their meals with it, retreating into dream chambers to seek divine guidance. Some scholars still argue whether this counts as a sedative, a hallucinogen, or merely folklore. All you know, you want a gallon. Now, in this quiet chamber, you're handed one final item. It's not food, it's a linen wrap. Embroidered with a single glyph, Ankh, the symbol of life, the priest gently wraps it around your shoulders. No words. Just care, a gesture that says, the feast is over, but your story continues. The room dims further. The oil lamps lower to barely a flicker. And from somewhere, soft music begins again, flutes. Water drums. A single harp string, plucked like a lullaby. You close your eyes, and just when you think you've tasted every sacred thing, one last bite is placed into your hand, a candied fennel seed, wrapped in gold foil. It's meant to be eaten after every royal banquet, to carry the essence of the night forward. You chew, it crackles sweet and bitter and cool. Like closing a scroll, and just like that, silence, stillness, the entire world contracts into your breath. Slow. Steady. You've eaten with gods. Dined like a pharaoh. Consumed stories older than language, and now, wrapped in warmth and mystery, you drift. There are only 2 parts left, but really, this could be the end. You are ready to sleep in golden chambers, and dream of honey, spice, and stars. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Nile breathes. You can't hear it, not really, but you feel it. A pulse. A tide in your chest. As if the river itself is inside you now, flowing slow and heavy with every breath you take. You don't remember falling asleep. You don't remember waking either. You just are. Draped in linen. Bathed in amber light. Wrapped in dreams that smell like sandalwood and honey. And then, one more dish, not because you need it, but because the night isn't finished with you yet. The priest returns, his movements no louder than dust. He places a shallow stone dish beside you. On it, 3 shadow olives. That's what he calls them, small. Wrinkled. Deep purple. Almost black. So glossy they catch the light like wet ink. Each rests on a cushion of dried hyacinth petals. You reach for one, it bursts with salt and oil and memory, not just flavor, but feeling. Like tasting the last line of a poem, these olives aren't common. They come from old, gnarled trees that grow along the Nile's less traveled edges, trees said to have been planted during the reign of Hatshepsut herself. Olives, in ancient Egypt, symbolized peace, balance, and return. They were pressed into sacred oils, packed into jars for the afterlife, and occasionally, just occasionally, served to living pharaohs as tokens of remembrance. Historians still argue whether they were eaten or simply venerated. But under your tongue, the answer feels simple: yes, you eat all three, and as you do, something shifts. There's a new texture in the air, not heavier, quieter. Like the hush that comes before dawn. Like the temple exhaling after a night of secrets, another bowl is placed in your lap, a small, round one made from polished sycamore wood. Inside, a single scoop of dew melon mousse. Pale green. Topped with golden date dust and a tiny sprig of mint. You smile, of course. You lift the spoon and taste. It is everything you want in a last dish. Cool. Light. Gently sweet. As if morning has already arrived and is letting you borrow it early. The mint prickles your tongue, while the date dust lingers in the corners of your mouth like the memory of honey. Dew melons were grown in sacred gardens. Their juice offered during full moons. Their flesh sometimes carved into the shapes of birds, then chilled and served at seasonal rites. You've never tasted a sunrise before, but now you can say you have. The mousse melts away, and just when you think there's no room left for more, you're handed a scroll, not to read, to taste. It's a thin sheet made of sweetened papyrus, infused with crushed fig, inked with edible blue dye into the form of a blessing. It's a written dessert. You tear off a piece, almost afraid to ruin it. It dissolves on your tongue like spun air. A whisper of fruit. A flicker of spice. A murmur of words not spoken but absorbed. The ancient Egyptians believed that words had power, even when consumed. Especially when consumed. They called it eating the name, a way of taking meaning directly into the body. Of merging story with self. You eat the scroll, and for a moment, you are the scroll. Then, one final item, a glass ring, filled with syrupy golden liquid. This is the closing elixir. You don't ask what's in it, you just lift it to your lips. It tastes like every bite you've had tonight. Wrapped into one. Honey. Smoke. Spice. Stone. Memory. The priest nods, satisfied. No more courses. No more flavors. No more symbols, only breath. The light fades slowly now. Not into darkness, but into warmth. The kind that hums in your chest and behind your eyes. A light that says, you are full. You lie back once more. The feast is done, but the story continues in your sleep. 2 more parts ahead, and then you'll be ready to let go completely. You are barely here now, not in a scary way. In a floaty, ancient, time doesn't matter kind of way. Your limbs are warm sandbags. Your thoughts are clouds. Your breath is the soft creak of a temple door opening to moonlight. You're still in the chamber. Still wrapped in linen. Still surrounded by the quiet breath of oil lamps and the ghost of harps that stopped playing hours ago, but your body has become story-shaped, and there is one last page to turn, a final dish, not dramatic. Not burning. Not dripping with history, just simple, a stone bowl of warm almond milk, flavored with cardamom and a single strand of saffron. No spoon. You lift it in your hands. It feels like holding a sleeping animal. You sip, and everything inside you lets go. The sweetness is soft. The spice is quiet. It doesn't ask you to notice it. It just happens. Almond milk was sacred in some temples. Used to anoint statues. Offered to the dead. Given to children on festival mornings. And sometimes, just sometimes, poured warm into the hands of a pharaoh before bed, like a lullaby you drink. Some argue this almond milk was mixed with barley or honey or rose water. Others say it was just almonds and silence. You agree with the second group. The warmth travels down your throat like liquid light. Then, with no ceremony, a small charcoal biscuit is placed beside you, crumbly. Gray. Smells faintly of anise and salt. You break it apart with 2 fingers. It crumbles like time. You take a bite. It's not sweet, not salty, just still. It's the punctuation mark at the end of everything. Charcoal was believed to purify the body. Biscuits like these may have been used to close the stomach, signaling to the body that the feast, spiritual and physical, was complete. Some tombs contain fragments of similar recipes. It tastes like sleep dressed up as food. One more item, a tiny, leaf-wrapped package, handed to you as if it were sacred, and it is, inside. A preserved fig seed, just one, no sugar. No syrup. No spice, just the seed, it's symbolic, meant not to be eaten, but to be planted, in a dream, because pharaohs didn't just dine on food. They dined on eternity. On stories. On meaning. And you, now, have done the same. The priest places the seed beside your hand. Then steps back. Not away. Just back, and the room begins to dissolve, not physically, but narratively. The feast has ended, the story has been eaten, you are not just a guest anymore, you are part of the myth. A traveler who touched time, tasted dreams, and drifted through an ancient kitchen lit by stars and theology, and now, there is nothing left to do, except sleep, except float, except let the fig grow in your dreams. So now, here you are, the feast is over. The torches have gone out, one by one. The room is dark. Not frightening dark, just velvet soft, like you've slipped behind a curtain that blocks out the world and all its noise. Your breath is slower now, your thoughts barely whisper, everything you've seen tonight, the strange honey pearls, the crocodile tail, the fig-shaped gods, it all lingers like the scent of a story you once heard as a child and never quite forgot. A tale you swallowed without realizing, one that lives now in your belly and your bones. You are full, yes, but more than that, you are still, the kind of stillness that only comes when everything inside you agrees to rest. So let it rest, let your limbs melt into the bed beneath you. Let your eyelids be heavy. Let your jaw soften. Your shoulders drop. Let your mind stop naming things, just float. Float down the Nile of sleep, past reed beds of memory. Past temples of forgotten flavors. Past gold and linen and laughter and ancient voices that have always, in some way, been whispering to you, you are safe, you are sacred, you are exactly where you need to be, and whatever dreams come next, may they be soft, and slow, and just a little bit strange, because sometimes, the best kind of sleep begins not with silence, but with a pharaoh's feast.